All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's session. I'm Roger Thompson, founder of the Success Systems community. I have with me here Jessica Luna, who's the CEO of Curate Mint and a leadership coach. Now, you say a leadership coach, and we're talking like the best of the best here. That's all we bring. And honestly, one of the great things about our discussion today, which is all about EQ, emotional intelligence, is that Jessica also has a phenomenal course called the EQ Driven Leader. We will talk about more later on at the end. But really, the topic today and the focus area today is all about EQ. And, we're excited for you to engage in the comments below. You can ask questions. If you are interested, you can check out my community and we can continue the discussions there. A recording of this video will actually be housed there as well. But otherwise, today is all about EQ, and I am so happy to have Jessica here with us today. So before we jump into things, it is only fitting, I think at least, to show a really interesting video. I'm curious to know what you think about it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I come to you with not great news. The market has changed, as you know, and we have to move with it in order to survive so that hopefully we can continue to thrive and deliver on a mission. This isn't news that you're going to want to hear, but ultimately it was my decision, and I wanted you to hear from me. It's been a really, really challenging decision to make. This is the second time in my career I'm doing this, and I do not want to do this. The last time I did it, I cried. This time I hope to be stronger. But we are laying off about 15% of the company for a number of reasons. The market, efficiency, and performances, and productivity. If you're on this call, you are part of the unlucky group.
Fuck you, dude.
I was supposed to cut off that video before that expletive word came out. I apologize. But anyhow, first and foremost, Jessica, have you ever seen that video before?
I haven't, actually.
So that was the CEO of Better.com. This was early in the pandemic, and he decided to lay off, I think he quoted 15% of the workforce, which is my understanding, someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, 900 employees. And he did so over a Zoom call. So for those of you who are watching, you may or may not have heard that story before or seen that video. But Jessica, would you say it's fair to say that that is not necessarily a trait of a strong EQ leader, what he did? What do you think?
I would say no. I mean, obviously it's very challenging, like the situation he was in. I mean, I've seen that happen a lot of different ways, but just to have everyone on one call, just like the logistics of it, I mean, not even to mention EQ, but the logistics of it are really insane to think about.
Absolutely. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, really happy to have you here today. And so let's just kind of dive into the topic of EQ. It is a hot one these days. We hear these terms all the time, but like, what is EQ? How do we think about EQ as leaders? Can you kind of frame up what EQ is? I know you shared with me a really great resource that you put together. Would it be helpful that I share that as you talk through this, or what do you think is the best way to start, Jessica?
Yeah, you can put that up on the screen and I can kind of walk us through it. I think to kind of dive into what we think about EQ. So I want to talk about the misnomer first, because when you say, what is EQ? What do we know about it? How does it apply to our work and how we function as human beings? We think about emotional intelligence as just being aware of your emotions. And we obviously it's in the name, right? So we want to think about emotions only, but it's really more broad than that. And it's a very complex skill as well. And so I think it's hard for people to grasp when we talk about EQ as a skill. It's actually four major domains and then lots of skills within that. So
Mm,
if you are a visual learner, you can look at the graphic that Roger put up. But the first big part of EQ is self awareness. So, self awareness is, as I mentioned before, of course, recognizing your emotions, but also it's, again, more broad than that. And I like to think about it like a mindset awareness, really, because it's not just your emotions, but it's also your thoughts, your own personality, your strengths, your opportunities as a person, your kind of deeper seated beliefs that you might have based on your upbringing or your environment and things like that, your identity, which can change as we grow and age, of course. And so that is the first piece of it, so awareness. And then the next piece of awareness is that one was focused, of course, on you. The other one is social awareness. So that's focused outward on others. And it's kind of a similar definition, but again, it's focused on others. So, what do you recognize about others? Can you perceive others' emotions, their thoughts, their opinions about certain things, their limitations, their identities, their strengths? And when you're a people leader, that really comes into play pretty heavily when you're thinking about how do you help your team grow and develop. Understanding kind of the angle that they're going to approach a project with, as an example, is another thing where if you are able to perceive, again, how that employee, maybe was brought up, or even their region, that can impact how they're going to approach a project and then how you lead them for that project. Then, so if we talk about, okay, those two pieces are the awareness, the knowledge, then what do we do with the knowledge? So the action. And then that's where we move into the other two pieces. So self management is the other side of self awareness. So once you have that awareness of self, how do you use that knowledge to manage yourself
mhm.
so that you are managing your actions, your words, your behavior appropriately? And then relationship management is kind of pulling all of that together, because then you're thinking about, how do I manage myself in a relationship? How do I use what I know about people to manage my relationship with people? And it could be, relationships a broad term, right? But we can use it in our personal lives, of course, with our spouses, our children, our friends. But in a business setting or a work setting, it could be our relationship with our team members, our relationship with stakeholders, with customers, with our leaders. So it kind of goes all around that way. So that's EQ in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Oh, I really appreciate it. And this graphic is striking. I mean, there's lots of detail in here as well. So maybe we could just dig into a few portions of it. Maybe we'll start with self-awareness a little bit here. So you have here: accurately recognize your own emotions, thoughts, perceptions, strengths, limitations, and identity. How does one even do that? How do you recognize your own emotions, thoughts, perceptions, strengths, limitations? Like, how do you do that in a practical sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, and I think that people don't realize how intentional they have to be and how present they have to be with themselves. And it's funny because, you think about talking to yourself a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a very basic concept, and some people feel silly doing it, but sometimes it is that simple of, what am I feeling right now? Or how do I feel about a topic? What is my opinion about XYZ? So as you start to reflect on yourself and what your strengths are, that's a really good one too. When you're, of course, a leader, but a professional in general, what are the things that you really excel at that you could talk about for hours? I mean, that's a really easy one too.
That's great. And for some of the audience today, you'll know the concept of the mood elevator. That might be a new term for you, Jessica. I'm not sure, but there's this idea where you are asking yourself, like, how is my mood today? Where am I at? Am I
Mhm.
at a 1, a 5, a 10? Where am I and why? So that's, perhaps one little tool you can use to kind of check in on yourself to be more self-aware. So, okay, so we have our, let's say we have a good sense of self and we're fairly aware of who we are and how we're feeling and all of those different attributes. Like, how does that then play into the social awareness, right? Where you have accurately recognizing the emotions, thoughts, perceptions, strengths, limitations, and identities of others. So how do we do that in practical sense?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ways you can look at it. So if you're aware of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
then you are aware of how you fit into a group. So you kind of think about the composition of a group or, a team as an example. If you know your strengths and limitations, then number one, it's easier for you to pick out strengths and limitations of other people too, because you start to recognize, oh, that person's really great at that. It's that simple. So I think we kind of overcomplicate it in our head sometimes
Mm,
too. The other thing too is being really present and paying attention to the person in front of you, active listening. You hear that a lot, but
mm,
that is really how you build that empathy muscle, which allows you to perceive people's emotions. And if you just, look at them, I mean, if you're present, right? Like you can tell when someone is
yep.
angry or upset or kind of holding back, like you can feel that. So if you're present, you don't have to overthink it. You can kind of feel it in your body.
That's a very good point. And you're right. Maybe we do overcomplicate it sometimes, and those feelings that we have, perhaps we're not leaning into them as much as we could be. And perhaps I think what you're saying is that those who have higher levels of EQ are able to do this more consistently and perhaps more accurately. I know that can be a tough word to
Yeah.
use when we're trying to perceive others, but sorry, I think I might have cut you off.
No, I think
Oh,
that's a really great point that you made about accurately um,
hmm,
recognizing that because, there is a balance with that where we want to feel into what we're actually perceiving of the person. Like, I feel like this person is angry because I'm seeing,
mm,
you know, signs in his face or his actions or his words are a little um like heated or, whatever it is, but you also have to balance that with not assuming, so you can say, okay, I'm kind of like saying to myself, I think this person is angry, but let me ask him how he's doing.
hmm,
And that's one thing I like to talk about too is not asking people, like, are you mad?
right.
Because what is that? That's going to like turn them off right away.
Yeah.
So instead describing what you're seeing.
Mm,
So, I'm noticing that you're raising your voice. Can you explain why to
hmm.
me? And so giving them that opportunity to express how they're feeling and then that then either confirms or doesn't confirm what you were kind of picking up. And then to your point, that strength and that muscle grows over time as you learn
Right.
how to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I'm reflecting on that video right now and I'm looking at this graphic here and I just make a couple of points. You'll correct me if I'm wrong in any of them. Perhaps the CEO had some level of self-awareness because he actually did call it out. I'm nervous. Last time I did it, I cried. It's very emotional. So maybe he exhibited some self-awareness. But maybe it's the bottom half here where it was a little tricky, the social awareness of the venue and also on the right hand side, bottom right, relationship management as well.
Yeah.
um that's probably where he would get the failing grade, if not everywhere. I mean, it's mostly the bottom half of this. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think, what I got from that video was a lot of the political angles of it
Mm-hmm.
too. And, with social awareness, that really informs the political moves that we make in business, right? Like
Yep.
if we know a person, then we're going to approach them a certain way to influence them because we know how they're thinking about something. So,
Right.
if you think about his actions, like maybe he thought he was showing self-awareness by or and even humility by saying,
Mm-hmm.
this is hard for me. But if you put yourself in the other person's shoes, like the person who was filming,
Yep.
you know, um, okay, I'm on a call with 900 other people. There is no privacy. There's no care. It's just like I'm a number. I mean, literally, I'm a number on this call. And the CEO, and again, COVID times, so that
Hmm.
has to be taken into account. Logistics. He probably,
Hmm.
thought that was the best way to do it. But there was a lot of different ways where they could have made it more personable if they would have maybe had HR do a call with like a smaller group of people and
Hmm.
have, there's all kinds of ways to do it in a different way,
Absolutely.
um, that is more caring, because it's a difficult message, but
Yep.
it can be done with more tact and class, I think.
Absolutely. And I would venture to guess that many of us on the call right now will not be put in a position that he was put in, or put himself in, perhaps I should say, because he was the one responsible.
Yeah.
But on a smaller scale, like within your teams, for example, if we're sharing negative news, maybe it's a customer, process breakdown, poor financials, the way in which we deliver that information matters. Um, the forum matters, the information matters, and also, understanding how others may receive it also matters. So, those are just little small little slivers of,
Yes.
perhaps some of these concepts. And I don't want to turn my back to the camera, but I do have to grab this. You recommended this book for me, Jessica, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I'm going to self-admit that I'm only halfway through, but it is fantastic. I really enjoy it. Highly recommend it as well, even though I'm not finished it, to be honest with you. But putting you on the spot a little bit here, like, what would you say is kind of like one or two big takeaways from this book that you think the audience might value?
Yeah, the reason I recommended that book, and that's the starting point that I recommend for all of my clients, is because it is formatted in such a plain language way. They break it down in such a logical way. And
Mhm.
it's this, EQ again is this kind of, it feels like this mystical concept that we can't break down because it's intangible, but the authors end up doing that. And the other thing is, again, they tie it back to, real life situations that you have, and then also their work with their clients.
Yep.
So I would say one of the big takeaways from the book is just, again, a point I made earlier, is that maybe you're thinking about it too hard.
Hmm.
So um, just think about, being aware of your surroundings, kind of slowing down and trying to take in all of the kind of sensory data that's around you. Like what's people's body language? What are you thinking? Because your team might be thinking something when, Roger just mentioned a difficult conversation.
Mhm.
If you're struggling with getting the words out, they're probably struggling with consuming the words. So kind of
Yeah,
thinking about both sides of that.
absolutely. Now, we're humans, on this call right here. Jessica's human. I am human as well. And trust me, I can speak for myself. I have made some EQ blunders in my career, and I continue to do so. I try to have the balance to be more on the positive than the negative. But I'll share a very, very quick story that I think many of you might be able to relate to, which is, around a difficult conversation. So mine that comes to mind for me today to share with you is, I did have to fire an employee. And the reason that I had to do it was because of certain actions that they took, which broke, some of the policies of the company and just overall values and ethics. It just wasn't aligned. But in Canada, where I'm from, here in Toronto, we have to be very careful what we say. And, against my better judgment, I was very direct, and it made the situation very bad very quickly. So I did not, essentially, for lack of better words, read the room. And I made a bad problem even worse by being very direct and, I guess a little bit disingenuous as well, just because I was disappointed. That's my rationale, at least. So that's, kind of me. And I'm sure if you reflect as well, I mean, I have a list of others I can go through. that there are times when, you know, you're the best version of yourself. And perhaps that's where self-awareness plays a role, where you try to minimize those situations. So I don't know if you have any comments about my story there, Jessica, or if you have any stories or story that you want to share about your evolution as an EQ leader.
Yeah, I think your situation is a very real one when you're a people leader, because unfortunately, I think it's rare. At least in my experience, it has been, but it does come up where you have to part ways with an employee. And I think, it's almost difficult to make it go well
Mm,
because that topic is just so difficult to talk about, and
yep.
it's challenging, and it creates anxiety in you because you're like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's very difficult and it affects livelihood, and the person probably feels very disappointed in themselves hearing
Mhm.
that. So I would say, in addition to the self awareness that you mentioned, also, obviously, like you said, read the room, the social awareness comes in
Mm,
too, and knowing that probably no matter what you're going to say, what you will say in that situation, it's not going to be taken well.
right,
And you
right. That's
kind
a
of
very
just
good
have to
point.
grit your teeth. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because when we were preparing for this chat, you
Yeah.
mentioned RBF. Well, I
Yeah.
know you may not be able to tell us exactly what RBF stands for. We can maybe fill in the blanks, but tell me a little bit about RBF and how that applies to you and your world.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Roger.
You're
That's
welcome.
great. And I'm like, I'm doing really well because I'm just like smiling the whole time. My RBF is not here today. No, I was, yeah. So what Roger mentioned is when we were prepping for this, I I talked about one of my first very memorable situations I had as a new people leader. Is my leader came to me because she was doing some 360 reviews and talking to my team about me and how they liked being, reporting to me and working with me and whatever. And so my leader got the feedback that I'm unapproachable. And I
Mm,
was like, what do you mean I'm unapproachable? Like, I feel like I'm this friendly, kind person. And that was the first time for me that I realized, like, I need to pay attention to how my face looks,
mm,
because I'm a very deep thinker, an analytical person. And when I'm in that mode, I have RBF. So that's where the RBF came up. Resting B face. I'm not going to say the word to be
yep.
PC, but yeah, I have worked on that quite a bit. And it's interesting because obviously it's, you could take that and say, well, that's like a lot of pressure to put on yourself to make sure
Mhm.
you look right all the time. But if you think about it, you want your team to feel comfortable coming to you, especially when they have something to bring up that may not be an easy topic to bring up. And so it's not to say that I have to be smiling all the time,
Mhm.
but I do have to be aware of, okay, if I'm, deep down analyzing something and I see a team member coming to me, or a team member, in our digital world chats me on the side or whatever and
Yep.
wants to talk, okay, I need to switch my kind of mindset from analytical to, I'm going to be focusing on them and making sure my body language says that too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The body language and just being, yes,
Yeah,
completely aware and intentional, perhaps with your defaults, right? If you have a default
exactly.
of like the closed arm, it's like maybe that's not a good way to be. You know, if it's your facial expressions, your posture, your tone, your pitch, all those different things, you can certainly make adjustments, right?
Hmm.
From your default to be more approachable, and that's not the right word, but I think
Yeah,
present the best version of yourself in that situation. um,
exactly.
yeah, so that's
And
great. Okay, so one final kind of topic area I'd love to cover is, I'm going to call it the burnout epidemic.
mhm.
um, how can leaders build more resilience, given kind of this burnout epidemic where you know, individuals, leaders, high performers are just saying, taking on so much, working more hours. We've kind of normalized this idea of like a hustle culture. And, it's okay to have many jobs and go, 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 go. I mean, what advice, suggestions, strategies do you have for people when we think about this topic?
Yeah, so this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because it's one of the reasons I created my course. And personal to my story is I did experience a pretty heavy burnout. I will say that burnout looks different for everybody,
Mm.
and there's different symptoms that you might have from of it or from having it, and also different causes. So when you say, it's go go go, I think that's definitely part of it. We all
Mhm.
have that societal pressure on us, whether it's like society in general, it's our loved ones, it's our own expectations, and I feel like we're all in these pressure cookers like that we
Mhm.
create ourselves. We have so much pressure we put on ourselves. And when you think about, having all of these priorities, you can't do all of them.
Right.
And if you do all of them, a lot of us, when we say, okay, we're going to do everything, we tend to not focus on ourselves anymore.
Hmm.
And so that's where it's a slippery slope that gets us into trouble. And especially as a people leader, you see all the material online, and you hear the thing about, like, real leaders are, it's like this badge of honor if you put your team above yourself.
Hmm.
And I really hate that narrative. And
Hmm.
I use the term hate very sparingly,
Yep.
but I mean, you can't put other people above yourself and expect for you to be able to be of any use to anyone,
Mm.
because talk about sustainability and
Yep.
resilience again. You don't have that cup that you've been filling up. So, the whole cliche about you can't pour from an empty cup comes into
Right.
play. But I would say thinking about, what are all the responsibilities that you have in your life? And
Hmm.
it's really your whole life, because it's not just at work, but it's also outside of work. So I know this conversation, we probably want to keep it couched in work, but just kind of keep that in mind, that those
Yep.
other pieces of your life are part of your burnout. And if you're a certain way at work as a leader, you want to take things on and you want to look like the high performer and say yes, say yes, say yes. You're
Yep.
probably doing that in your personal life too, with your relationships in your, family, your friends. You're saying yes, yes. And so it's just all across the board, you're burned out. And
Absolutely.
resilience, really by definition, is your ability to recover
Hmm.
from change or pressure. So if you think about someone who is on the verge of burnout, who is maybe depressed, they're disassociated with themselves, with people in their life. Maybe they don't have any motivation to work,
Hmm.
then it's going to be very hard for them to bounce back from change, because that's just another piece of pressure, another kind of rock on the pile of pressure, right?
Yep.
So that's where, for me, it comes back to EQ. And the graphic that you had up, there's a lot of stuff on the graphic, but one of the things in the middle was that connection of EQ to mental health. So if we think about, our specifically the self-awareness piece and the self-management piece of our own mental health, those are the two pieces of EQ that really connect to your mental health. So if you're looking at the graphic, you'll see in the middle that kind of brain
Hmm.
piece is your mental health, and there's all those practices in there that connect to mental health. But if you don't have a way to balance, fill your cup up, cope with things, then you're not going to be able to be resilient. You're not going to be able to bounce back because you're just burned out.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that's how I think about it, is two parts. One is having a plan in place, almost like an emergency response plan.
Mm.
So when things pop up, like emotions that are temporary, so something happens, it makes you mad. What are you going to do in the moment to
Hmm.
deal with that anger? That's kind of your emergency response plan or your coping plan. And again, that's kind of connected back to your mental health. And then more long term is more of that sustainment plan. which bolsters your resilience. And that is, how are you going to balance your life day to day where you're getting to do a little bit of all the things that you want to do that make you feel happy and fulfilled, like having success at work, being a great leader and helping your team develop, but also having great relationships outside of work and also doing hobbies and things that you love to do. So it's being really ruthless with prioritizing. So back to the kind of yes, 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 right? Like making sure that the things you say yes to actually align to those buckets that I described before. And then prioritizing yourself and having these mental health practices in place so that you are filling your cup up as you give, because you're giving to your team, you're giving to stakeholders, you're giving to your family. You have to give back to yourself so it doesn't get empty eventually.
Wow. Powerful stuff. And you know what? I mean, you are clearly not only passionate about this topic, extremely knowledgeable. And as you shared, kind of making yourself vulnerable, that you've experienced, some of these, the effects of burnout that many others might be experiencing or may experience in the future as well. You mentioned briefly, I'm going to shamelessly plug you. So I wrote in here the banner. I'm pretty sure that's what it was called. Is that right? You said you have a course called EQ Driven Leader. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And where would one find this course if they were interested?
Yeah, so they can go to my website. It's curatement.com, and there's a link to purchase that there. I also have a new masterclass coming out that's free. So it's just a free course to kind of give you a little intro into the topic and see if it's something that you're interested in that you think will help you. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn or sign up for my newsletter, then you'll be the first one to know when that free masterclass comes out.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm already signed up to your newsletter, so I'll be there for sure. Thank you so much, Jessica. I really, really appreciate it. And, for all of you, this topic is one that we need to continue to explore and learn. And, please feel free to give Jessica a follow, check out her masterclass, her course, so that you can be the best version of yourself. Shameless plug for me, Jessica mentioned priorities. This is what we focus on in the community that I run, called the Success Systems Community. We focus on not only how to identify your priorities, but how to actually realize them in your life, down to your annual, monthly, weekly, daily habits. So in that community, we kind of discuss best practices. We share stories, we help each other, and there's a course there that describes or gives you essentially the keys to an entire system to be able to implement this in your own life. So I think when you have priorities and you know your why, life becomes a little easier. And I know many of you, it's likely that maybe have not found your why yet. Keep searching. Don't give up on it. It's a really enlightening moment when you figure it out, and certainly it can change, but knowing your why will help align a lot of the things in your life. And my final note here is that you do not need to say yes to everything, right? That's a big takeaway for me, Jessica, right?
Yes.
And the importance of saying no and making smart choices. Thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you for future workshops. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.